Now. Hey, Derrick, thanks for joining me on the California Clays podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hey, I'm excited to have you because you are a very, very accomplished shooter. Just to name some of your accolades, you're the 2022 ISSF World Men's Trap Champion, 2020 Tokyo and 2024 Paris Olympian for bunker trap. You were also the 2018 World All-Around Champion, the 2016 World FITASC Champion, the 2017 and 2020 Nationals Sporting Clays Champion, and the 2019 ICTSF World Sporting Champion, along with many, many more accolades. And so I'm really excited about this because I really want to dive into your process and your experience and what you've done and how you've done it. You mentioned you were playing with Riley earlier today. Is she getting into shooting, or is she too young for that? I forget how old she is.
Yeah, she'll be 9 in May.
Okay.
So she's about the same age I was when I kind of started shooting a few targets. She hadn't really shown a whole lot of interest, but she does seem to be showing more interest in going with me to shoots, and she's going to go with me this weekend. And she started deer hunting last fall,
Oh
got her
yeah.
first, so that was that was a good time. She does enjoy shooting her BB gun occasionally, but
Right on.
she hadn't really asked or wanted to start shooting too much. So
So now, I mean, she has to be curious a little bit, right? I mean, your father shoots, her grandfather, and you're obviously shooting and traveling all over the world along with your dad as well. How did you both get into shooting? How did that process start? You and Rick.
so Dad got invited by a friend of his to a local sporting clays league, and I started tagging along. And naturally, I wanted to jump right in and start shooting. So Dad really hadn't shot a whole lot longer than what I have. We started shooting in the mid '90s, kind of when the game was really just starting to get going here in the U.S.
Right on. And then he got you into it immediately, or because you were doing it
Yeah,
together?
yeah, maybe 5 or 6 months after he shot his first targets, I got to tag along. So it, been in it most of my life.
Right on. No, I know Rick. He's a really good guy. Shot with him in Halise quite a bit. He's a very accomplished shooter himself. He's also, I believe, a world champion in Halise. Is that right?
Yeah, he won the 2011 Halise World Championship.
Right on.
He's
So now,
been a medalist multiple times.
and
I
also a Team USA member is from what I recall as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
From
yep.
so now, what was that? What was that like? Like when you first both got into it. Obviously, you both are hooked. Dad's bringing you out to shoots and stuff. What was he coaching you? Was he training you? Did you both get coaching from someone else? How did that work out?
Yeah, we, I would say we're mostly self-taught. I did have a couple lessons with Steve Middleditch when I was, 9, 10 years old. But that was it. It was just those couple lessons. For the most part, Dad and I just taught ourselves. We kind of learned trial and error, just learned our own way.
Now you were in Kansas, so at the time, correct?
Yes.
Was there a lot of sporting clays in Kansas at the time, or were you having to travel quite a bit?
We were pretty fortunate. We had two really good clubs. One that was about 20 miles away, and then Claythorne was about 30, 35 miles away. So we had a couple really nice clubs. Little Toledo Lodge was the other one. That's the place where I shot my first targets at, and then of course shot a lot at Claythorne. They started having big tournaments not too long after Dad and I got really into the game, and so we were pretty fortunate to have a couple really nice clubs close by.
Hmm.
But we did travel a little bit to tournaments and that kind of stuff.
What and around what year did that start? Was that the 90s or
Yeah, kind of 94, 95, right
okay?
along in there, is when dad really started shooting in 94. I shot a few targets. I didn't really join NSCA until late in 95, I believe. And then my first national championship was 96.
96. Okay. So traveling and with your dad shooting and competing, obviously you're both addicted to the sport. You're getting into it. What was your progress like? Did you reach master class very quickly? Did you just put on a lot of time, effort into it? Like what was that like?
Well, so masterclass wasn't a thing.
Right, that's
Double
right.
A was as high as you could get. I don't think I didn't really progress that quickly early on. I don't think I won my first trophy until 97, maybe,
Okay.
somewhere in there. Um, but I progressed and I got better. I always felt like I could do better, and I feel like as I was learning the game, I did keep doing better, and always felt like there was more out there to improve, for sure. I think Masterclass came around in 97 or 98, somewhere in there. Dad won Dad won double A at the US Open in Houston in 97,
Hmm.
and that was that was the first year of Masterclass, I believe, and he did not get invited into Masterclass after that. So he
Hmm.
got to shoot double A again the following year at the Meadows. They had the US Open in 98, and Dad won double A again, and that they had moved to the punch system to move into Masterclass. So after 98, when in double A at the US Open, he punched into Masterclass. Um, I think 97 was probably when I started moving up through the classes.
Hmm.
And by 90, late 99, early 2000, I got to where I punched into master class.
Now, were you shooting all other disciplines during this time as well, like trap and skeet, or was it just sporting?
No, it was just sporting clays.
Okay.
There was, we would go up occasionally and shoot. They'd have a big Memorial Day trap tournament up in Kansas City that we'd go shoot occasionally because they had some gold coins to win, but that was about it. There really wasn't any skeet tournaments around that we went to. No trap tournaments really that we traveled to. So it was all sporting clays.
That's interesting to me because you're literally known as one of the best all-around shooters in the world, in terms of all the various disciplines that you now shoot. And I've seen you in Halise, I've seen you in sporting, FITASC. You're obviously shooting Olympic trap. You've shot American trap and skeet, I'm sure. Was there anything I missed or anything that you wanna that I'm not aware of? Ice skeet, did you ever shoot ice skeet?
Just in college.
Okay.
Um, I shot it decent, but I didn't really love the game.
Yeah.
So I didn't really ever pursue after it. Trap was more my people. This kind of
Olympic?
Yeah, in the
Okay.
in the Olympic stuff. I gravitated more to the trap shooters than I did the skeet shooters,
Yeah.
and that's probably why I chose to pursue trap.
Can we touch on that a little bit? Like, what would you, and this isn't to poke fun or anything like that, just what's the difference you think personality wise between different types of shooters like that? Or is it more of like the process of the game itself that you
Yeah,
gravitated towards?
I think it's probably all of it. Um, Trap shooters tend to be a little less neurotic,
Hmm.
I guess is the way I would put it, and not to be derogatory towards
Sure.
international shooters at all, because they to go out and be good at that game, you have to put in so much training that it's just mind-boggling the number of targets you have to shoot for the repetition of it.
Right.
Trap, you can get away with just a little bit more. How would you? I don't know how you. Instinctive, I guess, in trap, but you do still have to work at it if you really want to be at the top of the game.
Hmm.
But and someone with natural ability can be somewhat competitive in trap, whereas if you're going out and you average 23 and a half, 24 in trap, you're going to be competitive. You got an average 23 and a half in skeet, and you're going to be way behind.
Right.
Now I feel like both of those are very capable for someone that is an instinctive, naturally gifted shooter
Hmm.
without too much work at it. But So, but to really get to that next level, both games take an insane amount of work.
Right, right. No, it's interesting that you say that. One of the things I always used to hear, because I've shot many different disciplines in California. We're very fortunate that we have traps. Every discipline you really want to shoot, we could shoot here, and within a 1 or 2 hour drive from at least the Bay Area. You always hear this saying, "Fear the man with one gun," right? Because every time I've gone to different disciplines, everyone's got a different setup for their gun. People have different guns even for the specific discipline that they're shooting. But one thing I learned about you is that you shoot one gun at literally all the disciplines. So can you talk about that a little bit? I kind of do it myself only because I can afford that. But what are your thoughts about shooting one gun at all the disciplines, and how do you set up for that?
Yeah, I think if you want to be your individual best across multiple games, you need to shoot the same gun across the board.
Hmm.
Just from the standpoint of you learn a sight picture, and every target is a target in the air. Now, the caveat with that it would be that if you want to be great in an individual game, you have to set up your gun for that game and then utilize that setup across the board in other disciplines. Um, so that's kind of what I've done is I set my game up or my gun up for more of the Olympic trap and then made it work everywhere else. But about 4 years ago, is when I really kind of made a change and I shoot two different guns now.
Okay.
Both the same barrel setup. I just changed the stock a little bit. My trap stock will be just a little bit shorter and have a Monte Carlo in it, which allows me to lock into the gun a little bit more and doesn't allow you to lift your head quite as much.
Interesting. Okay, so do you mind if just pardon my ignorance on this? So I know that you shot a sporting stock before, a Winnig
Yeah.
sporting stock, which is a parallel comb, right? And now you've
Yes.
switched for Olympic trap to a Monte Carlo, which has that little dip at the back of
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
stock. So it allows you to get and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, allows you to get a lower pocket mount, but a higher heads up look,
Yeah,
right?
it forces you to mount the gun higher in the shoulder because your
Okay.
pad is lower, which will allow you to lock into the gun, the stock just a little bit easier.
Okay.
Um, which for a pre-mounted approach is, I feel like the best way to go.
Right.
But like if I were to take that stock out and shoot sporting with it, I would do okay, but my gun mount really suffers from it.
Gotcha.
And
Because it's
and
a
I
it's a different mount.
yes, it is, and I struggle with pre-mounted shooting in sporting clays anyway, even on trap targets. I just I have a tendency to see the flash and pull the trigger without moving the gun on a trap target when I'm shooting sporting clays.
Right.
But you put me on a trap field or a police field where I don't exactly know where the target's going, that un uncertainty allows me to stay in the gun until I see the target and make a
Hmm.
move. So two totally different mental approaches to the game, different mindsets between sporting clays and Halise or trap that allow me to pre-mount in Halise and trap, but not in sporting.
Would you say the sporting stock is probably the more versatile, or vice versa? It sounds like the Monte Carlo is better for pre-mounted games,
Yeah,
police, bunker.
the sporting stock is definitely a more versatile stock. There are drawbacks to it when you're shooting pre-mounted because it does put you at a different angle with your upper body and your head
Hmm.
position when you pre-mount. But it's very small, but it does make a difference.
Did you change your point of impact, or at all, or
Not really.
okay?
The picture's pretty much the same from both stocks. With when my head is on the stock and I'm really into it hard, I'm fairly flat on the gun,
Hmm.
maybe a figure eight with the beads. So when you ease up a little bit when you're shooting, I got a small gap in the beads.
Small gap in the beads. Okay. And speaking of your beads, you did something pretty unique that I saw a few years back. I don't know if you're still doing it. You you took a fiber optic, a very small, thin fiber optic, and you use fletching glue, again, correct me if I'm wrong, up front to fix it. And then that became a little bit more of an accurate sight picture for you, or walk us through that.
Yeah, so I was looking for something that was peripherally easy to pick up
Hmm.
without being too intrusive into the overall sight picture. I like a really small bead for that aspect. I want to have something small there that I can see, but I don't want it to obstruct too much of my vision of the target.
Right, right. Yeah, interesting. I went through a similar thing. I didn't do the same thing you did, but I used the Ruby sight for a little bit until I could learn the sight picture, and then I took it off because I did end up barrel checking with it quite a bit. But did you train yourself not to look at that? I mean, that's obviously the fiber optic sometimes pops so much that.
Yeah, growing up and all through college, I shot with just a straight high vis on the
Hmm.
gun, with the whole kit and everything. So I kind of got used to having that very visual object out on the end of the gun.
Hmm.
I've just gotten to where I really like the smaller profile.
Right, right. Yeah, that goes to any site people out there. I mean, if they can create something, or Derek, you should create something with a really small site picture rather than these big honking, beads out there or fiber optics.
I think the close to the rib came from shooting the blazer, where the high vis sight was built into the rib, so it
Oh,
sat more flush on the rib instead of sticking up that 32nd or 16th of an inch like the
yeah.
high vis mount will go on to any other barrel.
Interesting. Okay, okay. You never shot a blaster though. This is just
Yeah,
taking from the. Oh, did you really?
yeah, yeah. I shot one for 5 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the different guns you've shot? I didn't know that about. I thought you were a Kohler and then Krieghoff guy, but
Yeah, no, I started with a Beretta Auto,
okay.
like almost everybody in the 90s. Either shot a Beretta or a Browning Auto. That's where I learned the game. I shot that all the way up until I think my junior year of high school. I got a DT10 and shot that for a few years. Shot it pretty well. And then I got my first Krieghoff about my senior year of college, junior year of college, somewhere in there, and shot that for a couple years, and then signed on with Blaser for 5 years before going to Kolar, and now I'm back with the Krieghoff.
Okay. That's great. Uh, I gotta tell you, I love that DT10. I've shot a few of them. The DT10 was such a well-made gun. It's just, I know they have the DT11. It's a great gun as well, but something about the DT10 was really nice. I know there was some mechanical things that they needed to sort out, I guess, over time, but that gun felt really good.
Yeah, I never had any issues with mine.
Yeah.
I also never picked one up that felt like mine.
Oh, okay.
Mine had really lightweight 32-inch barrels,
Hmm.
as light as most 30-inch barrels.
Oh, wow.
So it was like 1450 or 1460 grams,
Okay.
uh, which was super light for a 32-inch barrel.
Yeah.
Uh, that's kind of probably why I shoot the way I do, is I'm used to shooting a light barreled gun.
Hmm.
And
So let's touch on that. Like, tell us about your gun currently. And is it much different than the Kohler that you had? You recently made a switch from Kohler to Krieghoff, and you're back with Krieghoff now. What would you say were the differences in your gun setup, if at all, anything?
pretty much copied the stock straight over from the Kohler.
Hmm.
Probably the biggest difference is the Kohler is a little bit more weight back,
Okay.
um, a little lighter out front than my Krieghoff. My Krieghoff is a little bit more neutral balanced. Um,
And then
so I
the
think
ramp taper, were you shooting the flat rib Kohler or the ramp taper Kohler?
I shot both.
Okay.
Yeah, I shot the ramp taper for most of the time with Kohler, and then really when I started focusing on Olympic trap, the flat rib just fit my style better for that game.
Right.
Um, and the flat rib ended up being a little bit lighter than the ramp taper
Gotcha.
was.
And are you shooting 50-50, 60-40 for your point of impact, or do you know?
I, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I know that when a target's going away from me, if I make a move to it, I
Right.
break it. I'm not. I wouldn't say it's shooting super high, but I also don't think it's a true 50-50 either.
Well, I'm kind of glad that you said that because, there's so many things that you can kind of get wrapped up in with your game and your setup and overthinking a lot of this stuff. At the end of the day, I think what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is just shoot the target, right? Like get the gun to the
Yeah.
target and shoot the target,
Yeah.
and you'll figure it out.
I set my stock up where you take a simple going away target, and if my natural move turns that target inside out, then that's where I'm going to leave it. You know,
Okay.
I don't want to have to cover it up, but I also don't want to have to float it either.
Yeah.
You take an ATA machine and set it on dead straight away and go to the 16-yard line, and if I'm having to cover that target up completely, I don't like it. If I'm having to float it, I don't like it. So I just want to make a move to the leading edge of the target and pull the trigger and it disappear.
Right.
It's kind of my philosophy when it comes to point of impact.
Man, I wish you told me this years ago because I think I spent way too much time trying to focus on that and worry about that and overthink that and wasted a lot of good time where I could have just been shooting a target. So if you don't mind, I'd really love to dive into your experience as an Olympian. One, I think it's something that not a lot of people get to do, obviously, but it's such a great thing. Can you tell us from like let's start from the very beginning if you're okay with this. What made you decide to go from already a pretty large stage from FITASC being a world champion, national champion, all the accolades that you've had in sporting to finally go, I'm going to make my move to the Olympics?
Well, it started kind of when I was in college. I really started shooting some Olympic trap while I was at Lindenwood. Shot a few selection matches. Never shot great when I was there. And then once I graduated, when I was at the Cardinal Center there in Ohio that year, I was fortunate if I had a place that I got to get some practice in, and I made my first World Cup team in 2011, I believe, and I got to go to Australia for a World Cup. Didn't shoot very good down there. Um, just kind of shot it on and off, and then once I moved back to Kansas, I didn't have a place to practice, and so I kind of stepped away from it,
Hmm.
um, and didn't and focused more on sporting, running the gun club, sporting clays club. That became my focus, and I always had it in the back of my mind. In for the 2008 Olympic team, I was sitting tied for third after the first, or no, tied for fourth after the first selection match. But I was only like two or three targets out of the team spot. And then went to the second selection match coming out of winter. I didn't put any effort into getting any practice. I went and shot one time between the two selection matches and didn't put any effort into it. And I ended up missing the final for that Olympic trials by I think one or two targets.
Oh, wow.
So I always had that in the back of my head, man. I just probably wasted a golden opportunity there. Granted, I think I learned a lot as a shooter by not having success there. It forced me to focus on the things I needed to focus on to get my life started as well as become a better competitor.
Can
And
we touch
so,
on that? Sorry, not to interrupt, but can we touch on that? Like, what were your takeaways?
yeah, my takeaways are looking back on it now.
Yeah.
As a wasted opportunity.
Hmm.
At the time, I didn't, I always thought, oh, well, there will be more opportunities. This is something that happens all the time. Well, when you start really getting involved in the Olympic stuff and pursuing the Olympic team, it doesn't happen all the time. And it's a lot more physical effort to make an Olympic team than I ever thought it was when I was younger in college.
Hmm.
Um,
But there wasn't any takeaway like, hey, adjust this when you're shooting, and adjust this with your eyes, nothing
uh,
like that.
no, I wasn't at the time. I don't think I was thinking about the game in those terms.
Okay.
I was just shooting. That's all I
Right.
was doing. I enjoyed competing. I enjoyed shooting. I was not really putting enough thought into what I did that made me good and what I did that made me bad.
Hmm.
I just was out shooting.
So you've alluded to it already, how it's a lot more difficult and different. How is it different than competing in the other disciplines, like more specifically?
The biggest thing is the finite number of opportunities
Right.
for the Olympic discipline because we got two selection matches a year. You have to earn a spot on the team, and
And
if you
where
don't,
are those selection matches for folks that don't know, including myself?
um,
Is the same
sometimes
place every couple of years or
yeah, yeah, we have usually we'll have one in Tucson
okay.
and then one in Hillsdale, Michigan.
And anyone
Um,
can show up to that.
Yeah, anybody's eligible to show up to a selection match.
Okay.
This year we had our first one in Florida back in January, and then we'll have our next one in May in Michigan.
And what does that
But
look like? Is it like an elimination type selection match or
no, you shoot 10 rounds, so 250 targets, and
okay.
then the top six make the final, and they'll
Top
have an
six.
opportunity to earn some bonus points based on finishing the final. And they'll add the two selection matches together to determine who travels and who doesn't.
Okay. Now, you mentioned like initially you didn't have access to be able to train in those areas. Did you cross train in any other disciplines or?
Um, I did put in a wobble trap here at the house, and I
Okay.
shot on that as practice.
Hmm.
It was okay practice. It wasn't great. We've since built a bunker down at mom and dad's place, and that gives me a place to practice. But before that, I was having to drive to St. Louis or to Fort Worth to practice. So five and a half, 6 hour drive one way just to get practice in.
Wow.
That's a pretty tough way to be competitive. It got me to a point where I made the team to go to Tokyo, but I was not ready to go compete in Tokyo by any
Hmm.
means. Just didn't have enough targets under my belt.
Hmm. What's the field like? When you're meeting other bunker shooters, it's obviously a different discipline, different stage, different everything. How are they different than sporting clays, or how are they similar?
You know, the last few years I've gotten to know some of the competitors overseas fairly well, and I would say that the camaraderie amongst the shooters is very similar when you're seeing the same people over and over again as to like sporting clays. But one thing's for sure, you always get everybody's best shot when you're at a World Cup or the World Championships just because everyone takes the approach of, hey, I don't have very many opportunities to do this. It's not like you can pay your entry and go again the next weekend. You have to
Mhm.
earn your spot to go represent your country, and each country only gets 3 spots to win a medal.
Yeah.
So it's that changes the game immensely when you have so few opportunities to travel and go do. It makes it a lot more stressful. Puts a lot more pressure on you to perform each time you go out.
Can you talk about that pressure? You've always been on large stages, right? I mean, World FITASC is a pretty large stage. You won that. But the Olympics is on a whole other level. And we're really talking about the world stage, not the shotgunning world stage, but the true world stage. How do you mentally prepare for that? Did sporting help you prepare, or what was?
Oh, the sporting definitely didn't hurt. From a competitiveness side, competition side, it definitely helped a lot because I'd put myself in a lot of pressure situations. So I understood how to handle that part of the game. But when you start adding in millions of eyes looking at you while you're doing it, there was 200 or 300 people sitting in the stands watching the finals in Paris,
Right.
and who knows how many thousands of more people were watching online. But just knowing that I had those people watching, it actually fueled me a little bit more. It
Okay.
gave me an extra boost of energy. I had spent so much energy just to make the final that I uh, I needed a boost of adrenaline just to get me going.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that because I hear this from a lot of professionals, a lot of pros that are at the high level, not from hearing them talking about them personally, but just what they say. That pressure drives you guys, right? It doesn't make you crumble. It doesn't make you falter like like it would me, right? Or the average Joe person. How do you harness that? What is your pro? I mean, have you always been like that, or is that something, I mean, I've been a pretty competitive guy in other sports, and it didn't affect me the same way it does in shotgunning. So I'm wondering, has that always been the case for you, or did you have to train for that?
Um, I'd say just experience helped me
Yeah.
handle it more than anything. Number of times being in that position.
Hmm.
Now, granted, I hadn't ever been in that position before at the Olympic level, but just being in those positions in a spot of something that I was really wanting to accomplish, like winning the world championships in 22. That was something I had really set my mind to, and I talked myself into accomplishing that. Like
Hmm.
I convinced myself that I was good enough to go do it. And then as it started to happen, going through the qualification and then getting into the final, I was in a spot where the added pressure, all the people watching, the extra energy there just channeled my focus even more into what I was doing. Um, and I feel like that's how I've been throughout my whole career. When
Hmm.
it's something that I want, the extra pressure, the extra energy, all the excitement around it helps me focus more on what I'm trying to do. If it's something that I have doubts or a lack of confidence in, then that extra pressure and energy will quickly make you crumble. Makes you start second guessing everything, and so there's a big piece to if I'm confident in what I'm doing, the pressure is welcome. If I'm not confident in what I'm doing, it's not very welcome.
Can I ask something maybe personal that if you're okay with sharing this about your how you're handling stress and in that moment, just thinking about like kind of what goes on in my head. I'm just curious what goes on in your head. Let's say that the pressure's on, you've got everyone watching you, you know that you have to hit this target next. What kind of dialogue are you giving yourself?
I tune all that stuff out.
Okay, so
I,
there's no
I,
dialogue.
yeah, I'm focused solely on what I have to do to break a target.
Okay, interesting.
And about the only time that I gravitate away from that is as I get tired, mentally fatigued. That's about the only time where some of that other stuff will creep in.
Hmm.
When the other stuff creeps in, you're going to make mistakes.
Right. So is it then you're just focused on process then?
Yeah, I
Just
am solely
process.
focused the process to break the target. That's all I'm
Interesting.
focused on.
And then let's say the scenario comes up where like, okay, you're there, you've hit. Now you've got to miss. Back to process. No, like you screwed up. What are you doing? Nothing like that.
Yeah. No, back to process.
Okay.
I might think for a few seconds of what did I do wrong? What did I miss? But
Hmm.
I want to be positive in my thought. I want to
Right.
think about what I have to do to break a target, not what I was doing wrong.
Right. No, that's huge actually. And the reason why I'm laughing is if you heard the voice in my head when I miss a very, irrelevant or non-essential target, but for me it felt like it was. The voice in my head says very different things than what it says in your head. So that's good to hear that stay positive through those misses even. Do you ever get a negative voice at all talking to you, or is it just always
Oh,
like focus,
all the
positive?
time,
Oh, you
all the
do?
time. Yeah, yeah, it happens.
Okay.
Especially when I'm in a situation that I'm not really confident in.
Yeah.
Those negative voices will come into play. Um, But when I'm on my game mentally and physically, and I have confidence, um, I'm pretty good at keeping those negative voices out of my head.
Yeah, I've seen you shoot and I've shot around you and I've seen you exude that confidence. And if I were to put a description on it, it's a very quiet confidence. You're just very confident in yourself, but not in a, there's some, competitors that I see that are kind of arrogant about their confidence. You're just a hey, and you're willing to talk to people. Some people want to shut people out just because they're playing their own game. You've given me some great advice even while you're competing and also winning. Um, how did you get to that? Were you always quiet confidence, or did it take time?
You know, I think it's just growing up around my dad and my family, and growing up when I did in the game, the top competitors weren't very approachable.
Hmm.
So you weren't able to go ask them questions or anything like that. They kept to themselves, and so I always wanted to be that guy that was available.
Hmm.
I didn't want to seclude myself first, keep myself hidden. So
Right.
I early on, I was always checking scores. I was always front and center. I wanted to be around people, be
Yeah.
around the competition. And I think in the long term, that's helped me. It's helped me be comfortable in whatever the game throws at me. It's never going to be perfect out there. There's always going to be
Right.
distractions. There's always going to be a group of people coming around watching, wanting to talk to you, wanting to ask you questions. And if you shut them out, they're going to dislike their experience around you. So ultimately, that's going to hurt your image. Um, and but if you're able to just say hi and answer a quick question, it's going to make their day, because they're going to look at you. Oh, you took time out of your competition to say hi. So we're all real people at the end of the
Yeah.
day, and that's always kind of been my approach.
No, I've got a good story about how I met you. I think it was the 14 or 15 Western Regional at Quail Point Hunt Club. And I didn't know you. You just knew that I shot a Kolar. And I think you noticed it. And you just came up to me, gave me your gun, which I thought was awesome, by the way, and then took my gun. And then you mounted my gun and I mounted your gun. And we were pretty close and fit, but I think your length of pull is a little bit longer than mine. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought that was pretty cool because you were very approachable. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. So appreciate that about you. Let's go back to the Olympics a little bit. So you make it, you make the selection matches. What's the next step from there?
You have to earn a country quota slot.
Okay.
Um, you can do that. They usually start making those available at the World Championships 2 years prior to the Olympic Games. And then used to be they'd have some on some of the World Cup events. This go around, they did that more off world ranking and continental championships. So there's plenty of opportunities to win a quota as long as you make the team and get to go. So we can get two quotas as a country,
Okay.
is all that you're allowed to have in the Olympic Games. Um, so
Wait,
we
so
were
does that
fortunate.
mean
I
you can
won
only have
one
two people go per
it, per
gender?
discipline. Yeah.
Per
Yep.
discipline? Okay.
Yeah. So two in men, two in women, trap and skeet.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay. Interesting. And you have to earn the quota spot to get there,
yep.
meaning you're
Yep. You have
competing
to.
against another field of what? International competitors?
Yeah. So
Of the
when I
six
won the
that made the finals.
yeah, so when I won the World Championships in Croatia,
Okay.
there were four quota places available there. So the top four finishers that did not have a quota won a quota spot.
Okay.
So everybody that made the final there did not have a quota. So I won one. Nathan Hales from England won one, and then the guys that finished third and fourth each got one as well.
Okay. And sorry, how many of those events are available at the world level too?
Yeah, at the World Championships there were four,
Okay.
and then like our Continental Championships each had one,
Okay.
and then the Pan American Games had two. Those
Gosh.
were those were our opportunities to win quota places.
And that's just to compete in the Olympics. And then in the
Yeah.
Olympics, there's a elimination process too, right? To make it to the
Yeah.
finals.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So after we get our quota places, then we have a selection match to determine who takes those quota places to go compete in the Olympic Games.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a long process just to make the Olympic team. Then once you get to the Olympic Games, it's 125 target sprint, and the top six make the final.
Okay. And how many countries more recently competed in this? Do you remember?
I'm not sure how many countries were represented.
Hmm.
There was only 30 competitors in men's trap in the
Hmm.
Olympic Games. That's all the quota places that were available.
Hmm. Are you thinking about your competitors at all when you're shooting? It sounds like you're more process oriented, so you just one target at a time. But is there any a time when you're thinking, "Oh, I'm shooting against Nathan Hales, or I'm shooting against this person"?
Yeah, that always creeps into your mind when you're in the final, when it's
Yeah.
easy to know what's going on. Why I'm out shooting on the field, I'm pretty focused on myself.
Hmm.
But as soon as I walk off the field, I get to looking and see where everyone's doing.
Right.
It lets me know if I'm still in it or not. If I feel like I had a mediocre round and I go back and, oh, I still got a chance, it gives me that extra boost to go back out there and
Hmm.
perform.
So what does it feel like walking out on the field for the first time in the finals and everyone's clapping for you, they got cameras on you. What does that feel like?
It's exciting.
Yeah,
Just being front and center is an unbelievable experience.
sure.
Knowing that everybody back here in the U.S. is getting to watch me shoot,
Yep.
um, that that was really what drove me to make that big long run to make the finals last year. Is knowing that if I didn't do it, then no one back home would get to watch me shoot,
Hmm.
and so I was not going to let that happen. I was going to make it to the final, and that's what I set out to do.
No, that was awesome, man. It was actually really great to watch you do that. I didn't realize how much work you had to put just to get to the finals, though. I thought
Yeah,
yeah, clearly
I
I didn't do my homework on that part, but I didn't realize how difficult it was just to get there.
Yeah, so I missed two out of my first eight targets the first round, ran that round out, and then missed one in the first two out of the first 10 on the second round. And when I missed that third target, I'm like, all right, this range is not that hard. I can't miss anymore. I broke my last 89 of qualification
Wow.
and then broke 13 straight in the shoot off to get in the final. So I broke 102 straight to make the
So,
final.
so it was literally just telling yourself, listen, Derek, come
I
on
can't
now.
miss
This is
anymore.
an
Yeah.
easy course. That's literally what you
Yep.
told yourself. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep. I said, hey, it's not a hard range. You can't miss anymore. You have to hit them all.
Wow. Yeah, so my conversation would have been like, idiot, idiot, what are you doing? You effed up, you did that.
Oh,
That's
that
that's
that
that's
was
pretty
all that was
crazy.
all mixed in there too. But
No, but you parked that for when you got back to the hotel room, right? Yeah. No, that's great. What would you say is the difference between shooting nationally and internationally? Like, is there a lot different challenges, different things that you've experienced? Because you shot all over the world.
yeah, at the end of the day, shooting.
Yeah.
If you're shooting a clay pigeon, I don't care if it's 108 millimeter or 110 millimeter, it's still flying through the air somewhere between 40 and 60 miles an hour. Um, you just got to connect with it and let your gun get out in front of it and pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of been my approach. When I go overseas, they tend to throw faster straight line targets, especially in sporting and FITASC. Um, and to me, that is more of a comfort zone because big leads don't bother me. Um, Straight lines to me are easier than stuff that transitions. So at the end of the day, though, a target's a target, and that's what I'm there to do.
Hmm.
Uh, I think overseas, I enjoy um, the time you have to spend with your fellow competitors. You don't spend hours on hours out on the course. You like the World FITASC is my favorite event of the year. You go shoot 50 targets and you're done for the day.
Hmm.
So you have the rest of the time to go sightsee or go hang out at the shooting village with your friends or fellow competitors. It's just a nice laid back event. You go over to England for the World English, you get your start time and you get shuttled out to the course. You go through the course, and once you're done with the course, you have the rest of the day to yourself.
Right.
So it's not like here where you got to rush from this event to this event to this event to get them all in, um, which ultimately I think hurts us sometimes from a competitive standpoint. Is we just get exhausted from shooting so many targets that they just don't mean enough.
Hmm.
Whereas when you go overseas, every target becomes incredibly important because you have so few targets to shoot.
Being that clay shooting kind of started in Europe in general, do you feel like when you talk about the World FITASC too, and I'd love to, if you don't mind, touch on that too about your win there. Do you feel like they just get clay target sports more? And in America, we're just trying to shove every bit of everything down every competitor's throat because we're so hungry for it, and they're a little bit more laid back about shooting because it's just been part of their culture for so long.
I think they have a more of a general approach of they're focused on the competition side of it,
Hmm.
not the financial side of it.
Gotcha,
Um, I
gotcha.
think here in the US, there's been so much emphasis put on number of targets shot, which ultimately leads to more targets thrown, so clubs can make more money. But that's kind of the American nature. We're all about pulling the trigger as many times as we can, so it kind of feeds each other. Each other,
Right, right.
you know, there's nothing wrong with wanting to go out and shoot more by any means. Like I enjoy pulling the trigger as much as anybody. But I do think that in Europe and the rest of the world, they tend to be more focused on the singular competition as opposed to the volumes of targets.
Right. No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I was just watching Johnny Carter's commentary on a classic driven shoot, and it just really, just the way they approach it and the way they go about it and the way everything's kind of set up around it just seemed really interesting to me. Um, so your World FITASC win, which has forever been memorialized with the Field Sports Britain review of that one year. What was that like? How did your life change after winning World FITASC? Because that's a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah, I don't know if my life changed a whole lot. It certainly kind of, I would say, put me on a different level
Hmm.
from a competitive standpoint. It gave me the confidence that I could go win anything I would put my mind to.
Right.
Um, I had won the year before in Dubai. It was kind of my coming out party as
Hmm.
far as wins on a big stage.
Right.
But the World Feed Task was always one that I'd held in high regard, and that was one that I always wanted to win.
Yeah.
And so it meant a lot to me to go out there and win that one.
Yeah, no, that's one I think a lot of people look to, especially in the sporting world. One I'd love to go to. I haven't been to one yet. What's your favorite place to shoot internationally?
It's hard to beat Italy.
Italy? Okay.
I've been to Italy a lot. Shot a couple World Feed Tests there. Been there shooting bunker multiple times. It's just it's a cool environment over there because the shooters are so focused on the winners. Like
Hmm.
they're not just there to shoot. They want to be there to win, and they reward the winners.
Hmm.
They hold the winners on a higher level. So that aspect's pretty cool. But I really haven't been any place overseas that I didn't enjoy. Some of the places in the Middle East we've been, you kind of feel like you're trapped a little bit while you're there competing. But the competition part of it's still good.
Is that because they're controlling every aspect of the shoot? Like they pick you up,
Yeah,
they give you shells, they
yeah,
put you in the place, and you're staying to a
yeah,
certain area? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. So has that been like one of the more unique places to shoot as the Middle East, or where would you say has it been
Um, I don't
what
know.
surprised you when you went there?
Um, I I don't know that I've really been too surprised anywhere that I've been.
Yeah,
Some places are definitely nicer than others. But it's every place has its own uniqueness that
sure.
makes it a cool environment. Um,
Do you know how many
it,
countries you've shot in?
uh, it's quite a few. I know I've shot on every continent except for Antarctica. Um,
Okay.
so I've been just about everywhere in the world.
Yeah. I'm sure you get this question a lot, and I'm pivoting a little bit here, but and I've even had people ask me about you about this because I recently made the switch too. But you shot the Kolar Max Lite Sporter for bunker for all of your wins up till between what years were you shooting the Kolar?
Shot the Kolar from 2015 through the end of last year.
Okay. And now you're shooting a Krieghoff Parcour X. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's the difference between the two guns that you've noticed?
The biggest thing is the balance.
Hmm.
The Kohler is a little bit heavier receiver, so the balance is more towards the rear.
Hmm.
Um, I shot the gun really well.
Yeah,
It served me well
really
for
well.
for the 10 years that I shot it. I just really love the feel of my Parkour X. I do like the thinner receiver of the
Hmm.
Krieghoff. I feel like it gives me a better peripheral vision around the gun. Um, so that aspect has been a really nice change. But both guns are really well built, and I uh, I do really like my Krieghoff, and I'm glad I made the change.
Hmm.
I think for going forward, it's going to be a really good fit for me.
Right on. Well, how's the adjustment period going on? Everyone kind of goes through adjustment periods when they switch guns. What does that entail for you? Is it like a weight? Obviously, weight balance is different, but are you finding that you're quicker with the Parkour X versus the Kohler, or what do you have to change?
I really don't feel like I've had to change a whole lot.
Okay.
Um, there has been a learning curve in timing, moving with the target to pulling the trigger. Um, it's just a little bit different feel being connected with the target. Um, I feel like with the thinner profile of the Krieghoff, I have been able to go back to more of the quickness that I feel like people know me for. And some of that is just allowing me to trust the gun.
Hmm.
Um, I've spent a lot of time on the corporate course shooting a lot of fluffy targets to really get the feel of being connected with the target. That's
Right.
generally where I start when I make a change. Is I go to the bunny slopes
Hmm.
and focus on learning it there, and then gradually progress into more difficult targets.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. You said that a while ago on a podcast, and that stuck with me too, especially when you're training, is you got to be able to shoot all the soft ones, right? Those are the ones that you can't miss and afford to miss. You might as well practice and train doing that. It's
Yeah,
the tougher ones you don't
that
need as much time on.
that's something I took from my dad is
Yeah,
the, the easy ones lose it for you, the hard ones will win it.
right.
So you got to hit everything you can hit.
Hmm.
If it's a target that I feel like I should break every one of, I have to break them all if I'm going to win.
Hmm.
That's just been my approach. Over the years, I've been able to expand my zone. You know, 15 years ago, my approach was I wanted to own everything inside of 30 yards. And now I'd say I'm out to 40 or 45 yards and in. If
That's
it's
an
inside of
interesting way of looking at
45
it.
yards,
Yeah,
I feel like I should break every one of them.
right, right. That's interesting. And a majority of them are within 40 yards, right? So
Yeah.
wherever you
Yeah.
go, right? Am I
Yeah.
assuming that wrong?
Anywhere you go, if the target setter's really doing their job, you're not going to shoot many targets over 40 or 45 yards.
Right.
Maybe one or two a course. And most of those are just big floating belly birds hanging up in the air, not real fast.
Hmm.
Uh, so, that's kind of been my approach. I gotta break everything inside of 40, 45 yards. And if I do that, generally I finish pretty good.
Now, are you changing chokes when you're shooting sporting quite a bit, or do you throw like a couple of mods or light mods in there and call it a day, or what do you do?
I change a little bit. If the
Okay.
target's real close, I'll open up, or if
Okay.
it's way out there, I'll tighten up. But generally, mod or I mod somewhere in that range, 20
For
to
sporting.
25,000 for sporting. Yeah,
Okay. Interesting. And then bunker, I'm assuming iMod full or
yeah. A tight I mod and a
okay.
tight full,
Okay.
um, almost light full, extra full.
Okay.
Not quite, but pretty close.
Just touching on the gun again too, was the are they about the same weight? Your Kohler and
Yeah.
your Krieghoff?
My Kohler was probably 4 or 5 ounces heavier than my Krieghoff.
Okay.
But the balance is I've got the balance fairly similar. My
Yeah.
Kohler was just a little bit more butt heavy, but not too terrible.
I always wonder how many people know this actual number, but I know you do, as I do too with mine. What does your gun weigh right now? Your Krieghoff?
It weighs 8 pounds 9 ounces.
8 pounds nine. Okay, so you got it
Yeah,
up. Okay.
my Kohler was like right at 9 pounds.
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
And that feels pretty
Maybe
good.
yeah, just a fuzz over 9 pounds, but not more than an ounce or two over 9 pounds.
Okay. And that works for you from a balance standpoint and everything. Okay.
Yep.
Do you feel like it's really shooter's preference at that point then? Like when they're figuring out the game, like how do you find out what's the right ideal balance, weight, everything for you?
You
You just
know,
got to go through it.
yeah, you got to trial and error. If
Yeah.
the gun feels good in your hands, it's going to give you confidence and you're going to shoot it better.
Right.
That's kind of the way I look at it. I don't get too worried if it's weight forward or weight back. Doesn't bother me a whole lot as long as the gun feels good.
Hmm.
That at the end of the day means more to me than anything.
Yeah. You've been tinkering around with your gun quite a bit then to get that balance right, or
Actually, I didn't have to.
no?
I picked
Okay.
picked up the gun and went to Winnig, got a pattern stock made, and it just felt right in the hands. Got the
Yeah.
stock finished, and it still feels right. And so I've been lucky. I haven't
Got
had to do a
lucky.
whole lot of tinkering
Yeah,
from
that's
that
good.
aspect.
That's always good. The tinkering will also mess you up. I've found, at least for me.
Oh, I've seen me do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, Derrick, I really appreciate the time, man. I don't know if there's anything you want to cover also about the Olympics or anything else, but this has been really informative for me, and I'm really only doing this selfishly for me to get to know other shooters and their journey and their process. If people watch it, great. If they don't, oh well. But I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your time very much. You've always been a good buddy to me here in the shooting sports, and someone who's been someone to look up to also, shooting and what you've done. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I enjoy doing these. Enjoy talking with you. I think you've asked some really good questions, and I hope people can learn something from my knowledge and time in the game. I want to be an open book for the most part for someone that wants to learn the game and get better. I think that is something that our game has lacked in is something to um, keep the history of the game.
Right.
There's a lot of lost history in the shooting sports, and hopefully we can retain some of it, and we can keep the current history that's happening now. Hopefully we can keep good records of that going forward, and interviews like this definitely help with that.
No, I agree. And I've been really diving into the history a little bit myself, and it's really interesting just to kind of learn about it. What would you, speaking of being an open book, what would be the thing that you would want to share with let's talk about beginners, people that are starting their competition journey. What's some advice that you'd give them as they're getting into this? Because there's a lot to learn, a lot to dive into. The rabbit holes go deep. But if you were to, impart your wisdom on anyone, what would you say?
Be focused on your own journey. Don't get
Hmm.
caught up in other people's rapid rise to success.
Right.
Um, in my time in the game, there's been a lot of people come in the game and they get really good really quick, and it's short-lived success. And then they
Hmm.
always struggle to get back. To me, the guys that have had to work at it for longer periods of time have a longer run of success. You
Yeah.
take someone like Zach or Anthony, Corey, all the other guys my age. We were all learning the game as the game was growing here in the U.S. We didn't have the stable of winners available to learn from like is available today.
Right.
Nobody there weren't the number of people that had the experience, and so we learned the game as the game was growing itself, and so we had a longer learning curve to get to where we are.
Hmm.
But at the same time, that amount of work that we had to put into it built us a base that won't ever crumble.
Right.
Um, so I feel like if you can focus on your own journey, learn where you can learn, but work on your own game and build yourself. Don't be afraid of it being a longer slope to get to the top.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you're going to have a more solid base and enjoy the game for what it is. Enjoy it where you're at. Enjoy the learning process, and that's really the biggest piece is you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Right.
And if you keep things in perspective, you're going to enjoy it a lot more.
No, that's really good advice. With the prices of everything going up and everything, do you think it makes sense for folks to cross train in other disciplines? Because, you being an all-rounder, I think that's probably helped you, right?
Yeah, I go back to my statement earlier, shooting.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're shooting trap, skeet, sporting clays, you're learning something about moving the gun with the target, how to look at targets, and you're always going to have something to learn. So don't be afraid of going to the trap field. Don't be afraid of going to the skeet field. Don't be afraid to go stand on a grid and shoot just crossers and quartering birds. And,
Hmm.
don't be afraid to go to the corporate course and try and go out and break 100 straight,
Right.
that you have something to gain from all of it. Quality practice is way better than quantity at the end of the day. So if you go put your best effort into it, you're going to get a lot more out of it.
Hmm. Let me ask you one last question about winning and losing. You mentioned something about how you didn't shoot well at certain times, but that also drove you more. Is it safe to say that you've lost more than you've won? I mean, obviously, right? That's the case
Oh,
for everybody, but yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, you take the greatest golfer in the world, Tiger Woods. He never he never won a quarter of the tournaments in a year that he entered.
right.
You know, and that's an insane number to win.
Hmm.
I had one year, and it was a COVID shortened year in 2020, where I won five of the eight main events that I shot that year. That doesn't happen.
Hmm.
That was a perfect storm of circumstances that allowed me to be able to do that.
Right,
Um, but any other year, if I win three or four tournaments, that's been a really good year.
right.
My goal is always to be as close to the top as I can be and win it when I everything falls right for me to win. But you don't go win all the time. And if you focus on the failures, you're always going to fail.
Good point. Good point, man. Well, we'll end it with that. Thank you again, Derek. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thanks.